a prayer. They've all become very holy, Ceann Comhairle.
Well, we can do one if you want.
Whatever you think yourself.
We need a prayer.
I think entire rosaries and novenas would probably be more in our line.
Maybe a Hail Mary.
Absolutely. That would be nice. Okay, Gurmaigat, Ceann Comhairle. Taoiseach, yesterday I raised with you the very shocking case of Tori Towey. Tori is, as you know, a 28-year-old young woman from Roscommon. She's living and working in Dubai as an airline attendant, and she married last March. Since then, Tori has been subjected to sustained and brutal domestic violence and abuse. And when she went to the authorities to seek help, instead of being protected, she was sent home with her husband. Her husband then destroyed her passport, so she couldn't travel and she couldn't work. She couldn't come back to Ireland. Tori was, in effect, held captive by her abuser. Just over 2 weeks ago, she endured a particularly vicious beating. Her husband repeatedly slammed doors on her arms, trying to break her limbs, and he tried to strangle her. She fled upstairs in a desperate attempt to escape the violence, and in desperation, she tried to take her own life. When Tori came to, she was surrounded by paramedics, but instead of being taken to a hospital, she was taken to a police station. There, she was charged with attempted suicide and alcohol abuse. Tori was placed in a cell with 50 other women. She wasn't told what she was charged with. She wasn't given any information at all. Tori was released on bail, but her passport was blocked. She is banned from leaving the state. She's currently living in accommodation with her mother, Caroline, who travelled to Dubai to support her daughter. And all of this happened on June the 28th, nearly 2 weeks ago. Her appalling situation came to my attention yesterday and to the attention of my colleague, Deputy Claire Curran. And we've raised this with you in expectation that the government moves with urgency to end this nightmare. I spoke with Tori and her mother again this morning. I know that you've been speaking to them too, Taoiseach, and you know they feel isolated and vulnerable. They told me that they feel like they're being held hostage. They're scared. The coming hours, Taoiseach, are crucial because once the Dubai court process kicks in, it becomes harder and harder to get Tori back home to Ireland quickly. And Tori wants to come home. So the government must do absolutely everything to get her home, Taoiseach. This is an Irish woman, this is an Irish citizen, and the message must go out loudly and clearly that we will not allow any Irish citizen to be treated in this way by anybody. That we will confront this medieval, grotesque treatment of women, because women are not chattel, we don't belong to men, men do not own us. Tori Towey does not belong to her husband. She does not belong to Dubai. She belongs at home in Ireland, and we will not rest until she is at home. Tori Towey Iloran Trumlu is massa avek e gakban. Kahi an realtas gakrud is feather lo yen of kun eola rashawalya geheran. Taoiseach, when I raised this case with you yesterday and spoke to you subsequently, you said, and we agreed, that you would do everything you could to intervene to help Tori. Can you set out for us today what steps you and the government have taken in the last 24 hours to get Tori Towey home? And the Dubai authorities must drop the charges against her, remove the travel ban, and allow this woman to travel home.
Thank you.
Well, thanks very much, Ceann Comhairle. I agree with every single word you said on this issue, Deputy McDonald, and I want to thank you and I want to thank Deputy Curran for engaging with me on this matter, my colleague Deputy Fian also as well. This is a really distressing case, and I think it's so important that everybody around the world and people in Dubai and the UAE know that we're speaking with one voice in this House in relation to this situation. An Irish woman, an Irish citizen, has been a victim of horrific male violence, has been the victim of the most brutal, horrific attack one can imagine, And after enduring that horrific, brutal attack, Tori Towey didn't wake up in a hospital being supported and cared for and loved. She woke up in a police station. And we want Tori Towey back in this country. We want her back home in Roscommon. That's what she wants as well. And it's absolutely my position as Taoiseach. It's absolutely, I know, the position of the Taoiseach and the Minister for Foreign Affairs, and I know it's your position and the position of everybody in this House, that that's what must now happen, and happen with urgency as well. I did, as you say, speak directly to Tori this morning, and to her mother Caroline, who has flown out to be with her daughter at this extraordinarily distressing time. And I did tell them that this is absolutely a priority issue for me and the government, the priority issue that I'm working on right now with my officials, and the Taoiseach with his officials as well. I've also spoken, since we spoke on this matter yesterday, I've spoken to our ambassador in the area, and I must say, and I do want to say and acknowledge, Ceann Comhairle, that the embassy and the ambassador are working extraordinarily hard on this matter. I'm very confident of that from a number of engagements that I've had with the ambassador and her team over the course of the last 24 hours. My understanding is that the embassy is in ongoing contact with Ms Towey. I checked that this morning. That's essential. It's at least an Irish citizen can expect. And the ambassador has been in very frequent and intense contact with the Ministry for Foreign Affairs there and with the Under Secretary. I don't want to say too much more on the record of this House, because I don't want to say anything that cuts across that very intense effort that is underway, other than to assure you, assure Tori, assure her mother Caroline, and most importantly assure the people of this country that no effort will be spared by us, by Ireland, to make progress on this matter and to get Tori Towey home. She doesn't need to come home after a court case, because she is not a criminal. She's not a criminal. She's a victim of gender-based violence, and we expect her to be able to return here to Ireland as an Irish citizen without delay, and that's absolutely what I'll be working on, what the Taoiseach will be working on, and what the ambassador will be working on throughout the day.
McDonald.
Thank you for that, Taoiseach. And let me just say this. Tori is not, as you say, a criminal. She is, in fact, a victim. Our first concern is to get Tori home safely, and that must happen immediately. These charges must be dropped, and Tori and her mother Caroline must be allowed to travel home unimpeded freely to Ireland and to Roscommon. And that is the call from this chamber today. And I hope those the authorities and the royalty of Dubai is listening very carefully to this message. This is not acceptable. Not acceptable on any level, not acceptable for any woman. We are not objects, we are not chattel, we are not the possession of anybody, and our human rights matter, and our safety matters. And the safety of every Irish citizen matters to us, every Irish woman, and we will not tolerate this situation, Taoiseach. You agree with me on that. I'm glad that the contact now is so strong with the embassy. That needs to continue, but can I say further that every support, including legal representation, as an interlocutor with the authorities over, all of that now needs to be absolutely firmed up for Tori. And the bottom line is this, and I hope that the ambassador from Dubai is perhaps he watches Oireachtas TV or RTE or whatever the case may be. So there is no ambiguity in the point. We want Tori home, and we want the charges dropped today, and herself and Caroline to make their way back. And then the wider issue, Taoiseach, around the treatment of women and the abuse of our human rights in jurisdictions such as this also needs to be on our diplomatic agenda very, very firmly.
Thank you, Deputy.
Yeah, thank you, Deputy MacDonald. Absolutely. Step one here is to get Tori home, and obviously her mother with her, who's out there actively supporting her at this very distressing time. For that to happen, the travel ban needs to be lifted. That is the current block in terms of Tori coming home. and that is the immediate request, demand of Ireland that happens. In relation to that issue of legal representation, I am advised that free legal aid will be made available, but I share your view and mine that it shouldn't arise. Tori's not a criminal. She needs to get home. She's been a victim of gender-based violence. So it's there, but it shouldn't arise in my view as well. And look, we've had a lot of discussion in this House, worthy discussion, important discussion indeed. A debate has just concluded in this House in the last few minutes on the issue of a zero-tolerance approach to domestic, sexual and gender-based violence. And let me say that we take that approach not just to Irish citizens who live here, but we expect that to be afforded to all Irish citizens across the world. And not only that, we also expect to be a country that will continue to speak up and speak out and advocate for a zero-tolerance approach to domestic, sexual and gender-based violence for any woman, anywhere in the world as well. But the most important thing right now, in the here and now, in relation to the Tori Towey case, is to get her home, to get her back to Ireland, to get the travel ban listed, and I'll continue to engage with you and keep the House informed.
Aodhán now, please.
Gurmagat, Ken Corda. Taoiseach, this is probably the last interaction we're going to have for a while because I got a new job. Where are you working? Bonjour. Well, I think when the Taoiseach and the Minister for Finance don't remember the 1990 World Cup, you realise you're a total outlet and you need to get out. But anyway, the important point that I wanted to make today in probably our last interaction for a while, Taoiseach, is an issue that I've raised quite a number of times over the last number of years, and it's the reason I got involved in politics in the first place. It's about disadvantaged education, it's about DEIS schools, it's about DEIS Plus. DEIS Plus is a proposal from 3 areas in Dublin, Tallaght, Ballymun and Dublin 17, to replicate what has been happening in Dublin 1, which is a multidisciplinary approach to trauma-based supports for the most acutely disadvantaged schools. Now, when I raise this with the Minister for Education, she always gives me a positive response, but she says that there's an OECD review in the second quarter of 2024 that's going to review the entirety of the DEIS system, and that's fine. And we've now come through that period. But the difference between your job and our job over here is that when you're the Taoiseach, if you care passionately about something, you can really make it happen very quickly. The problem with being a member of the opposition is that if you care passionately about something, you have to cajole, you have to lobby, you have to meet, you have to try and amend legislation, you try to plead with ministers. But in some in your position, the great thing about your position, Taoiseach, if you decided that DEIS Plus needed to happen, it could happen. And we wouldn't need to wait for budgetary decisions, we wouldn't need to wait for long discussions about it. If you're passionate about it, it could actually happen. We're talking about 100 schools, and we're talking about the most profoundly disadvantaged children who have a whole suite of trauma and intergenerational disadvantage which they're trying to battle through. And I know that you know that education is the one chance that children have to break out of poverty. I understand that, you understand that. So in the case of these schools that have been identified by the INTO, the Irish National Teachers Organisations, I know the three areas of principals have been engaging with the department, and it has been positive, and we're almost there. But can you give a commitment? I always ask, and we always ask when you meet the principals, but I think we've gone beyond that. If there was to be an acknowledgement, we can't just make a quarter of the schools in the country, as we have done, give them DEIS status and think that that makes a difference to the most profoundly disadvantaged children. And when we talk about crime, we talk about drugs, and we talk about inequality in Irish society and all those issues, fundamentally a huge amount of this comes back to the chances that children have in their classroom at the earliest age. It's 100 schools, it's a new scheme, it's already worked in Dublin 1. Can we make it happen in the most profoundly disadvantaged schools across the country? It's 100 schools and it's called DEIS Plus.
Thank you, Deputy Taoiseach.
Gurmagat, Ceann Comhairle, firstly on your last day, or at least our last exchange, can I wish you well? I know your election to the European Parliament has been a major milestone for you and your party, and I genuinely wish you well as you take up continuing to represent Dublin and Ireland, albeit in a different capacity. And I say to all people elected to the European Parliament, everybody in this House is rooting for you. Because when you go over to a major parliament, of course, people wear from time to time their party jerseys. but actually the Irish jersey is so required in terms of working together on key issues. And I've always enjoyed exchanges with you on a variety of issues, but also trying to work collaboratively with you on an issue that I know you're passionate about in relation to adult literacy as well. Look, you kind of very much outlined the role of the government, the role of the opposition, and it's not an unfair way of outlining it, but there is another way that the odd time in this House the government and the opposition can actually work together on things and can actually try to make progress, and I do think educational disadvantage is one such area. The DESH programme has been transformative, as you rightly say, and I was looking into this earlier. It's now a programme that's supporting around 240,000 students in Ireland. 1 in 4, that is 1 in 4 students, and there's around 30% of schools now supported by the programme. There's a budget of €180 million, and it is making a real impact. And as you know, we've expanded DESH to other schools as a recognition of its success. We do want to see other iterations now and taking steps forward on DESH. So let me say that to you as the head of this government. That is the direction of travel we want to take. And before getting directly to DESH Plus, we have taken a very significant step that I think you'll support recently under the leadership of Minister O'Gorman, where we've effectively introduced DESH for preschool. Because, and again, I know I'm talking to the converted on this, but if you believe in tackling education disadvantage, the earlier you tackle it, even the better. And the Equal Start programme, which effectively is DESH for preschool, will see 700 services benefit across the country with extra staff and extra funding from this September. And that will, in real terms, that will mean around 32,000 children, some of them as disadvantaged children, getting that benefit of DESH, that Equal Start at preschool. So that's the most immediate thing that we don't need to wait for the budget, that is actually kicking off in September. I think the idea of DESH Plus, and I'm conscious you've heard warm words about this before, but I think there's real merit in it. Because as we continue to invest in education, there's the issue around universality and there's the issue around targeted. I think we're doing well on universal, we need to continue to do more, but we need to target. We need to actually start targeting specific interventions. And DESH Plus, I think very much recognises that. So the Minister is very aware of your proposal and very aware of the proposal. She has met with a lot of principals in relation to this. The answer is the OECD review is being completed at the moment, but it's also being complemented by a programme of work by the Department of Education to develop further policy. What's the next iteration for DESH? Now, the good news is there's a time frame for that. We're expecting to have the report from the OECD team this summer, so we should be in a position to make policy decisions in terms of what's next for educational disadvantage, what's next for DESH in time for the budget in October.
Taoiseach, Deputy O'Leary.
Yeah, look, research has shown that if you take 2 3-year-olds, right, 1 3-year-old from a middle-class advantaged background and 1 3-year-old from a disadvantaged background. The disadvantaged 3-year-old has 400 words in their vocabulary. This 3-year-old has 1,200. So by the time that they're 3, even by the time that they're 3, there's a massive gap in their capability to reach their full potential. That's before you bring in issues of addiction, of housing issues, of intergenerational trauma. So we don't have time to waste here because we're losing the potential of these incredible children. So I appreciate what you're saying, but if we were to make these interventions, it would be absolutely transformative for these lives. And often when I raise this, people always say to me, well, there's children in non-DESH schools that are disadvantaged, and I accept all that. But the level of profound problems that we have in some of these schools across the country. There was one principal who told me that they have to change their routes of swimming every week because there's a local feud happening and there may be a stray bullet that kills a child. And these are the decisions that principals have to make that many people in Ireland would just not comprehend. So look, for the potential of these children, for the investment that could be made, because we have money, I would ask again that you give this proposal the respect it deserves and to make it happen. And then we can see in 10, 20 years' time the benefit that would accrue from this investment at this time.
Thank you. Taoiseach.
Well, look, thanks very much to Deputy O'Riordan, and I think you've made me feel even stronger about the point I was making in the first answer about the importance of Equal Start with those statistics around where a 3-year-old is at. I wasn't aware of them, but it's stark, isn't it? And I am pleased that Equal Start DESH for preschool will begin from this September with 32,000, of the youngest children benefiting for the first time with a positive discrimination, if you like, in terms of both funding and staffing allocation. We are determined to do more on debt, and we are determined to do more on educational disadvantage. And the pathway we will take to do that is the conclusion of the OECD research, plus the work that Minister Foley is doing on her department at the moment, where they've just concluded, I think, a consultation with around 200 principals of both post-primary and primary schools. That, plus the OECD work over the summer months, will feed into the opportunity to develop the next steps on that debt journey. And I have a funny feeling that whether you're in Dublin or Brussels, we may hear from you again on this matter, and we look forward to continuing to engage.
Thank you, Taoiseach. Thank you, Deputy Aodhán. Deputy Boyd-Barrett, please.
Taoiseach, first of all, can I just add my voice to condemn the outrageous treatment and events that have occurred for Tori Towey, and to call on the UAE government to immediately drop the charges and allow her to come home. It's absolutely outrageous. But I want to raise another issue with you. Taoiseach, this is the last week of the Dáil before the summer recess, and this is the last opportunity I'll have to question you at Leaders' Questions. And for 6 weeks now, we have been calling, as have many in the opposition, have been calling on this government to have a discussion on the Housing Commission report, a report published in May, which is absolutely damning of the government's failure to address the housing and homelessness crisis. We got a commitment that you would do it, and you have not done it. Now, my question to you is the reason you don't want to discuss the Housing Commission report revealed in the budget parameters that were announced yesterday in the summer economic statement? Because what's absolutely clear to me is that the call of the Housing Commission to effectively double the output of housing, to address the housing crisis, and to dramatically increase the delivery of social and affordable housing, which is what they called for, is not provided for in the summer economic statement. Last year, the government allocated €5 billion towards housing for all. That was to deliver 33,000 houses, including about 16,000 social and affordable houses. €5 billion. To deliver on targets that the Housing Commission say are half of what is needed. They say we have a 250,000 housing deficit and we need to build 60,000 houses a year and dramatically increase the proportion of social and affordable housing. Basic calculation, in order to do that, we would need an additional €5 billion, or close to it. But the government's additional expenditure on capital investment announced yesterday is €1.4 billion. And that's presumably not just for housing, because we need investment in schools, we need investment in water infrastructure, we need investment in special needs, disability. So what is announced yesterday, and the Minister said he's going to stick very tightly to this in the budget, is a fraction of what is necessary to deliver on the increase in housing output necessary to address a housing crisis that has more than 14,000 people, including 4,000 children, in emergency accommodation, that has about 170,000 people on housing waiting lists, and has tens and tens of thousands of ordinary young and working people in this country completely locked out of a housing market that is out of control. So, what do you say to that, Taoiseach? Are you actually, and is this government actually taking seriously the scale of the housing emergency, or are you just gaslighting the people? Because the money you have allocated for the budget to deal with this crisis is a fraction of what the Housing Commission said is necessary to address that crisis.
Taoiseach, please.
Thanks very much for that, Deputy Boyd-Barrett. So this government takes the housing crisis and the housing situation extremely seriously. It is the biggest societal challenge we face, and it's an intergenerational one that causes significant anxiety across the country. But of course, you know we take it seriously, and you know some of the figures that you never mention when you stand up here to speak on this issue, and that's your prerogative. But we're now living in a country where over 300 homes every single working day are going to construction. We're living in a country where over 500 people, individuals and couples, are buying their first home every single week. And we saw, contrary to the assertion that you put out there, the largest number of social houses allocated any time in my lifetime, and you go right back to the 1970s to find a figure higher. So you'd get this impression out there from your narrative that none of that's actually happening. Commencements are up, completions are up, planning permissions are up, and there are real reasons to believe now that we can credibly lift the scale of ambition. And this point I agree with you on, that we do need to lift the scale of ambition in terms of the number of homes that we wish to build over the course of the next 5 years. And the Housing Commission report, which I say respectfully, you somewhat wrap yourself, and I don't believe you agree with all of its recommendations either, and if you do, that would represent a very significant policy shift on your part, because it talks about the need to support small landlords. It talks about the need to have private development as well, and private funding of development too, neither issue that I've heard you advocate for in this House before. So what we will now do is, yesterday government agreed the draft National Planning Framework. That, coupled with the ESRI research that was published last week, will enable us to set new housing targets this autumn. We absolutely look forward to debating with everybody in this House how those new housing targets are delivered and are exceeded. I think when you reference the figure of 5 billion, and I say this respectfully, I think it's a little disingenuous, because as everybody knows, the summary economic statement only outlines spending from the Exchequer. It doesn't include any planned activity from the Land Development Agency, an agency which we've already capitalised significantly. It doesn't provide any indication of funding for the Housing Finance Agency. It doesn't provide any indication of the funding that's available through the European Investment Bank. And whilst it might be an anathema to you, it also doesn't provide any indication of the fact that private developers and builders will also build homes in this country as well. And you know what? That's okay too. So actually, it's not just the state that builds houses, and it's not just the direct exchequer that funds the building of houses. We as a government have provided capital funding for housing in 2024, coupled with the LDA, coupled with the Housing Finance Agency, at, as you acknowledged in fairness to you, a record €5 billion, the highest ever in the history of the state. And I fully accept, and the Minister for Public Expenditure and Reform fully accepts, and the Minister for Finance fully accepts, and the Minister for Housing fully accepts, and the three parties in government accept, we'll need to do more. But how we do that, we will work with this Oireachtas on in the autumn when we set out the housing targets.
Thank you, Taoiseach. Deputy Boyd-Barrett.
You see, you haven't answered the question. Yes, is there more house building? Yes. Is there a bit more social housing? Yes. But the Housing Commission is saying we need to double it, as against your targets. That's what it's saying. And the 5 billion I referenced, I know damn well the LDA is included in that, and the Housing Finance Agency, but that total figure was due to deliver 33,000 houses, including about 16,000 social and affordable. Now, if we're to do what the Housing Commission says, we have to double that from all sources. The private developers will do what they're going to do or not do, as the case may be, but we have to deliver the social and affordable housing to address those who are in emergency accommodation, to address people who are on housing waiting lists for decades, and to address the problem of working people being unable to afford astronomical house prices. You have not provided the money that can do that, based even on your previous investment in housing for all. You need to double it, which is what we and others have been saying for years, and it is now confirmed by the Housing Commission. I don't agree with everything they say, but they are right about the level of housing delivery. So why are you not allocating the money? And if you say you don't have the money, you have it in terms of the budget surplus, the infrastructure funds, and you can impose a wealth tax like the French people are asking for now after the recent French election with the Popular Front in France.
So firstly, we didn't need the Housing Commission to tell us we needed to increase the housing targets. I mean, before I... Well, hang on a second, we're doing it, but we do it in a kind of clear, methodical, evidence-based way. So I very clearly announced before I became Taoiseach that we needed to build 250,000 more homes between 2025 and 2030. Many people scoffed that, not people in this House in fairness. Many people scoffed that, said it wasn't possible, wasn't going to be credible. Now we have ESRI research, we have Housing Commission reports, we have the view of the CIF, all indicating that it is absolutely possible for Ireland, all parts of Ireland, not just the public sector, to deliver 50,000 homes on average a year from 2025. And I think, I don't speak for any other party, but I think there's a growing political consensus that that's where we need to get to. I'm very clear that we are going to need funding mechanisms and more funding mechanisms to how we do that. And we have a number of work streams underway under the remit of the Cabinet Committee on Housing to prepare for the publication of the new targets. We'll be back here in the autumn with the benefit of the public input, and I hope your own, on the draft National Planning Framework, with the ESRI research, where the Minister for Housing will outline how he intends to raise the targets and a level of granular detail in terms of how we intend to go about that. And it's not fair to suggest that the summary economic statement portrays the full picture in terms of capital investment on housing. It doesn't, because it only includes direct exchequer.
I have Deputy Michael Fitzmaurice here, but Deputy Michael McNamara, please.
Taoiseach, I wish to raise the case of a young man which sort of exemplifies a lot of what isn't working in our asylum system. His name is Taib. He lives in Scariff, County Clare. You'll know Scariff. You were there a few months ago to announce public expenditure and forgot to invite public representatives from outside of the government parties, but it can happen. People in Scariff are, I was there, yeah, people in Scariff are hospitable, very few would remind you of that. They're generally kind and forgiving people. Taib quite likes it there, but there's no university in Scariff. He's been given a place in UCD, which he wants to take up. He wants to get on with his life. He applied for asylum on the 5th of January along with his parents. He made his way from Gaza to Egypt and from Egypt to Ireland. He's been asked if he could transfer accommodation to Dublin so that he can attend university where he's been offered a place. He's told no. However, in the event that he can finance private accommodation, they will keep his place in Scariff, so he'll be able to go back at holidays, which indicates that they're willing to spend money accommodating him in Scariff, where there's no university, but not in Dublin, where there is. But he wants to do this. He wants to get on in life, he wants to contribute, he wants to work. 6 months after you apply for asylum, you have a right to work in Ireland. Now, 6 months is set out because it's kind of accepted that you should have an asylum claim processed in that time. This is a young man who, along with his family, came from Gaza. His asylum claim hasn't been processed in that time. It won't be processed in that time because our times are painfully slow. We say that this new migration pact will be a magic bullet, but there's nothing preventing the department from speeding up processing times already. They haven't done so, as you well know. You were a minister in that department. He applied for a work permit. That hasn't received a reply to that either. So he's effectively a burden on the Irish state, but he wants to work, he wants to go to college, he wants to get on with his life. So do the vast majority of people who come to Ireland, but they're not being processed quickly. And while your government at a macro level is very keen to be seen to be doing the right thing around asylum and even around Palestine, when it comes back to the individual, it is utterly dysfunctional and it doesn't work. Now, I want to know, why is it taking so long to process asylum claims in Ireland? And why, in particular, unlike Syrians, when they came to Ireland, there was a specific scheme set up so that their applications could be expedited. For the very few Palestinians that come to Ireland, what is being done for them? Because it's all well and good to engage in international diplomacy about recognising a state. How about recognising the humanity of an applicant who has had family members die and who has come here from Palestine, but just wants to get on with his life and contribute to the society in which he finds himself?
I enjoyed my visit to Scariff and meeting you there, and did apologise that you didn't get a formal invite, and I wish you well with your new you were looking out for the others, but thank you. I appreciated seeing you there, and I wish you well. Genuinely wish you well with your new role in the European Parliament. And look, thank you for raising this issue. And there's a number of elements that you have raised. So let me try to work my way through them. I mean, I think the first is the issue of, I need to be very honest with people in relation to accommodation. And you have rightly told the situation of a young man here trying to do his best, trying to get educated, trying to get to work. That's something that everyone instinctively is supportive of. I also need to be truthful that we have about 31,000 people in accommodation, and we all know, and you'll have highlighted in this House, there is huge pressure on the system when it comes to accommodation. And we're not in a position currently with international protection applicants to provide accommodation at a location of their choice. Now, when you when you bottom that down to an individual case, I can see how difficult that is, because these are human beings, but that is the truth. And you know, as we move beyond the emergency system and try to build a sustainable migration system, which we're doing in real time, one would hope that we'll be in a different position in relation to that. I think this issue, and I will follow it up for you directly in relation to the individual case, more as an example of the broader issue, because you are obviously right that an international protection applicant does have a right to work here after 6 months, and indeed there's many small businesses I meet across the country who are looking for labour. People aren't looking to be sitting here on welfare. There's businesses, and Peter Burke knows as well, there's businesses who would only be too delighted to be able to give people an opportunity to earn a few bob and to help out in the local economy as well. So once someone has waited at least 5 months from their application received date for the first instance, they can then lodge their application. You know this. Now, I've been told that from February 2024, they did bring in a new online system to try and have a shorter processing time for these applications to work, and that the system is currently processing applications made in the month of April in a processing time of around 10 weeks. But let me get you some more detail in relation to that, because that doesn't seem to be the experience as well. Minister Burke tells me that when it comes to work permits, which I know is a slightly different system, but 20 days, I think, is roughly the processing time there too. The broader issue in relation to processing of international protection applications is we are making some progress. I accept it's not where we wanted to be yet, but we have doubled the number of staff in the International Protection Office. And despite only doubling the staff, they're trebling the number of decisions made. They're working extraordinarily hard. But again, as you know, we've seen 11,052 people apply up to the 5th of July this year, compared to 5,625 last year. So the honest to God answer, and it's important to be truthful about this, is we are trying to build a system for a much larger number of applications in real time. And that requires not just extra staff, though that will be forthcoming, not just extra budget, though that is forthcoming, but it also requires, I think, having to look at how we can use technology, how we can operate much more efficiently and effectively, how we can do online interviews, how we can use facilities like City West and not just the International Protection Office, and that work is underway.
I completely understand that, of course, that the state can't accommodate people where they want to be accommodated, and that's not my complaint. My complaint is that he can't actually work to earn the money to pay for the accommodation in Dublin. You say that people can apply after 5 months and then it takes 10 weeks, but they have a right after 6 months. So they're going to be waiting for a period. You're implicitly acknowledging that people's right to work is being denied, and that right to work was gained in a Supreme Court case and fought tooth and nail by the government at all stages, and ultimately it was because of a case in the Supreme Court that the right to work of asylum seekers after 6 months was determined to be a right. But the issue is that we're treating people like chattels. They're being moved around the state rather than any meaningful attempt to integrate them. I mean, there are beneficiaries of temporary protection who are moved out of Loop Head, which is an area of depopulation, where they've been integrated, where people want them to stay, and they're being moved because of compliance issues. Now, I've been asking questions, finding it very difficult to get answers as usual about what the compliance issues are, what's happening, but regardless, they're not the fault of people who are looking to integrate, who have children in school and are being told, because of some compliance issues, your children can't go to school next week or next month. They have to go to another part of the country and start that integration process all over again. If we are going to accept people, and we have an international duty to accept them, we have to put systems in place where they become integrated, not moved around the country like chattels.
I agree with the last point, that of course we have to put systems in place and build a sustainable migration system. All I can assure you is that there's a huge amount of work underway on a very daily basis to make that happen. We'll have another Cabinet Committee on Migration tomorrow, and the Minister for Integration, the Minister for Justice, others are working really, really intensively on this, and I'm very proud of their work. But I do think we have to, and I don't say this to be argumentative on possibly our last exchange, but there is sometimes an inconsistency in the approach we take to this. And this is not aimed at you directly, Deputy, but like when I go around the country, or indeed when I come into this house, people say to me, you can't keep using hotels, you can't keep taking public facilities out of use. Then, all of a sudden, we have a significant reduction in the number of people from Ukraine in accommodation. We're spending a lot of money on hotels and bed and breakfast. We say, well, okay, we'll take some of the hotels back and put them back into public use. And then people say, and I understand this on a human level, I see it in my own constituency, people say, well, hang on a second, we don't want you moving the people from our community. So like as the Taoiseach, I have to kind of try and have an overview here The reality is we're trying to make sure we have a sustainable accommodation supply, not have a situation. Well, no, you're talking about, and I don't want to personalise it to Ukraine, but you're talking about people living in one area and having to move to another area. That's often because we find there's a building half used that the taxpayer is paying for. I can't stand over that either. All of this is hard. None of it is easy. It all has to be done in a compassionate way. These are human beings with rights. But it is just an indication of some of the challenges we face in trying to balance the various responsibilities.
Thank you, Taoiseach. That concludes Leader's questions.